Hello and thank you for joining me on this short food law update. It's Friday the 7th of June 2024. Now at the moment there's an outbreak of E. coli that's been reported by the UK Health Security Agency that's affecting mainly England but also involves some cases in Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland, although I understand the case from Northern Ireland had actually contracted the disease whilst actually in England. And I thought it might be helpful just to briefly describe what's going on behind the scenes. Now, I'm not involved in this investigation, and so I don't know any of the facts other than those that have been published by the UK HSA, and I've put those details below this video so you can go and read their press release for all the details of the number of cases and the instance and so forth. But I thought it might be helpful just to describe, what's going on behind the scenes, because I think many people don't realise that an outbreak investigation involves many agencies and an awful lot of work. So where we are at the moment, now we've been told that we have cases of E. coli, and we've been told it's STEC. Now what is STEC? Well, it's Shiga toxin E. coli. Shiga toxin is a type of poison that's produced by, produced by E. coli. It's a particular strain of E. coli. It's a particular dangerous food poisoning bacteria, but it's very similar to the toxin produced by Shigella, a dysentery food poisoning organism. Microbiologists are not very imaginative. They'd be very good at catchphrase, should we say, because they tend to say what they see. And when they're describing E. coli, this particular food poisoning bacteria, they see a toxin, a poison, very similar to one another. So they say it's Shiga toxin. So there we are. So basically, we've got this outbreak associated with there's about 120 cases or something in that region around the UK. Now, we've been told that whole genome sequencing has identified that there is likely to be a common source. Now, what's all that about? Well, perhaps I just explain, before I go into whole genome sequencing, should explain that any outbreak investigation typically involves three elements. You have the microbiology, you have the epidemiology, and then you have the environmental health investigation. And all three are really important, and all three tend to happen all at once. What we've heard is the report from the microbiologists. The microbiologists have picked up that there is this type of food poisoning going on. They've carried out this whole genome sequencing. Now that's basically, I suppose, an easy way of saying it's like an assessment, assessment of the DNA. It's like DNA fingerprinting. Every single different bacteria will have different sequencing within their DNA. If you do this whole genome sequencing, you can find that a bacteria is identical. So this is why they've gone public on this. They found, by looking at the bacteria that's caused the illness to someone in England, it's exactly the same bacteria that's caused the illness in Scotland and in Wales and the person in Northern Ireland. It's not a similar type of bacteria, it's exactly the same one. It's come from the same place. So it's a bit like Cluedo at the moment. The microbiologists have identified the weapon, if you like. We know it's the candlestick, we know it's the E. coli that's causing the illness. What we don't know is how did the E. coli infect people? Now with E. coli, the STEC E. coli, typically it can be spread through foods, and we know there are certain types of foods that are more likely to be connected with E. coli. For example, raw meat, raw milk, things like soily vegetables, things like salad vegetables, that sort of thing. But there's no indication that any of those foods have been involved in this outbreak. Also, because the infective dose is very, very low, person-to-person spread is very common. So when dealing with these sort of outbreaks, you need to be aware that you might get a case, but that person who's ill might have actually caught it not from eating food, but caught it from someone else who was ill. So the microbiologists have identified we have an E. coli STEC outbreak. It is the same bacteria that's caused the problem. Now, the epidemiologists will look at the data. They'll look at things like profile, the ages. They'll look at where people were that were ill. They'll need to look at the whole range of details of what they ate. And what they'll do is a statistical analysis of the likely source of that. Now, in order for the epidemiologists to carry out a statistical assessment of the likely source of the infection, the environmental health investigation has to take place. The environmental health investigation would typically be environmental health officers and their support officers who will go out to people who have been ill and will ask them basically a detailed questionnaire, not just what they've eaten over the last few days, but what they've eaten over a whole bunch of time. We understand that the index case, the first case, was something around the 25th of May, which I believe is a bank holiday. So they'll be investigating back to them, but also they'll be asking questions of contacts, who they've been in contact with. They'll be taking additional samples from people to find out whether some people might have been carrying the bacteria. In other words, they may be asymptomatic cases. They might have eaten a food and been affected by it, but not really noticed the symptoms. And therefore, they may be spreading the disease, but not aware of it themselves. So the environmental health investigation will be looking at all of that. What they'll do is they'll feed back to the epidemiologists. The epidemiologists will use all that number crunching, and they will identify maybe anything that's common. It might be a common age, it might be a particular event. I mean, obviously bank holiday, all sorts of festivals and things. It might be a common food. It might be several. I mean, life's complicated. It might be several outbreaks at once from the same source, the same factory or same food, whatever. So as the evidence is sifted through, the epidemiologist should be able to point towards a source, and at that point proper environmental health intervention might be required. So the environmental health officers might need to get involved in taking samples of food from a premises that's been implicated. Maybe they might be looking at closing down premises that are implicated. But the Food Standards Agency will also be looking at that and coordinating much of the response in terms of coordinating things like product recall if that's necessary. Maybe there's an international factor to this. It could be an imported food that's caused the problem. So the Food Standards Agency would have to liaise with other countries, whether it's EU or outside the EU. So you can see it's a very complex situation. They've chosen to go public quite early with the details of this outbreak, which I think demonstrates the severity of it. It may be they're hoping more people will come forward if they've been ill, and therefore they may find more data. In other words, more cases means more investigation, which means more data, which means more certainty. If everyone ate a particular type of food, and were ill, then it points towards that food, doesn't it? So that's what's going on at the moment. We will see over the next few days some indication of the likely source of the outbreak if it's identified, and you will see the environmental health departments then moving in to take appropriate action. So I had to caveat, look, I don't know what's gone on behind the scenes. I have no inside information other than that's been made publicly available. But I just thought it might be helpful for those I've seen on social media saying, well, no one's doing anything, and all the conspiracy theorists out there. Just wait. The authorities are working. They're working very closely together. You've got the main agents, the UK HSA, you've got the devolved public health authorities, you've got environmental health departments, you've got the Food Standards Agency, so you've got the microbiologists, the epidemiologists, the environmental health professionals, the public health professionals. They're all looking at this, and they're looking at facts, and they will come back to the public with more information once they've got it. Anyway, thanks for listening to this, and I look forward to seeing you on my next update.